everyone, I am AJ from AJ Tutorials, and in this video we will be doing a little bit of math. And I know some of you are very excited about that, others aren't. However, in programming, especially in certain programs and apps that you'll be working on later, math is very important. And today we will be learning the basic arithmetic or math operators in Swift. So let's get started by creating a new Xcode playground. So open up your Xcode application, click on Get Started with a Playground, and we could just call this Math Operators. Okay, now delete everything inside of this page because we are going to be working with an empty, clean slate. So again, remember these two dashes mean that, or these two slashes mean that I'm creating a comment in Swift, and this will not be run, so I can type in whatever I want here. Again, this is great for taking notes. So in Swift, we have math operators, and we have many math operators. A lot of these operators you are familiar with from math class. So I'm going to list out the 4 that you are the most familiar with, and then I'll be talking about one that's a little bit less familiar. The first one is known as the addition operator. And the addition operator adds two things together. Then we have the subtraction operator, and they subtract two numbers. These are quite simple. Then we also have the multiplication operator. And remember, in Swift, we do not use X to symbolize multiplication, we use the asterisk. So we will use the asterisk, and this is the multiplication operator. Then we have the slash, the same one in fact that we used to create a comment, so don't confuse it. This right here is the division operator. These 4 we are quite familiar with. So if I wanted to create a variable, and remember in the last video we talked about creating variables, and we create variables by typing in var, that is a keyword we use to create a variable. And let's say I have this variable as sample int, that is the name, it is a sample integer. To use the addition operator, I can say 8 plus 4. And if I were to print out, remember print is to get information out of our code. If I want to print the value of sample int, you will notice that sample integer should be, if it runs, it should be 12 because 8 plus 4 is 12. If I were to do the same thing, except change the addition operator to the subtraction operator, 8 minus 4, and I run it, it should be 4 because 8 minus 4 is 4. Same, if I were to multiply these numbers together, 8 times 4, I should get 32. As I do, because 8 times 4 is 32. I can use the division operator. 8 divided by 4 should give me 2, which it does. Now there's something interesting that I want to talk about with the division operator. Let's say I have 8 divided by 4. Let's say I change this 4 to a 3. 8 divided by 3, and I run my code. You will notice that it prints out a 2. That is confusing because 8 divided by 3 is in fact not 2. It is definitely not 2. So why are we actually getting 2? Well, it's important to remember that all variables have data types, that the value that's stored inside are the data types. And remember, from the data types from the last video, you remember that the data types are integer, double, boolean, and string. Or at least these are the ones we were talking about in the beginning. Integers are whole numbers. Doubles are decimal numbers. Booleans are either true or false. And a string is a collection of characters or text. So what is happening with this variable sample integer is that 8 and 3 are both integers. So if I'm doing 8 divided by 3, the return type will be the data type is an integer. Because I'm using two integers and then dividing them, it's going to give me an integer value. As you can see, if I use the print statement and then the type of, which we also learned in the last video, type of sample int, you will notice that it's giving me a type of integer. Now, I want you to notice what happens. Again, if I print out sample int, it should give me 2, and that is incorrect. Watch what happens if I change if I change 3 to 3.0. You will notice now that it prints out the correct answer, 2 2/3. This is interesting. What did I do to the 3? Well, I changed it from an integer to a double. Because again, a whole number does not have any decimal. And we learned in the last video that there is a difference between 3 and 3.0, and that 3 is an integer and 3.0 is a double. So when I'm doing this division problem, 8 divided by 3, if both numbers are an integer, then the data type is still an integer. But if one of those is a double, then the entire thing becomes a double. So that is very important to remember, because there is a huge difference between 8 divided by 3 or 8 divided by 3.0, which actually gives me the right answer. And that decimal can go on either number, or it can go on both numbers. And it's probably the best to put it in both numbers just so that you remember, but this is a way that's very important to remember, that if you are dividing two numbers, you want to make sure that you are using a double somewhere, because a double will definitely return you a decimal value if there needs to be one. And that is a common error in a lot of people when they are beginning. They can say, oh, well, 8 divided by 3, it should give me 2.6. Why is it not? It's giving me 2. And that is because if you're using two integers, the data type is an integer. If I change this to 8 divided by 3.0, then this will be a double data type. See, if I use 8.0 and I use the print type of, and then I use sample int, which is, of course, is not a sample integer anymore, you can see that it prints out double. So that is very important to know. So now we've talked about addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. There is one more math operator, which is slightly less known outside of the coding world. And it is the percentage sign. And it is known percentage sign, and it's known as modulus, the modulus operator. So what does the modulus operator do? In fact, let's go back to that equation that we had. We had a variable sample int equals 8 divided by 3. A normal division problem, for example, if I go and I print out the sample int again, a normal division problem will divide the two numbers and then return the result. However, sometimes that's not what we want. We actually want the remainder in a division problem. And that is where modulus comes in. Because if I take 8 modulus 3 and I run it, you'll notice that it prints 2. Because 3 goes into 8 a certain number of times with 2 as a remainder. 3 goes into 8 twice, and that gives us 6. And there's a remainder of 2, so it prints out a remainder. So you might be wondering, well, how is this useful? Well, think about this. We can actually check if a number is even. For example, if I wanted to check if a number was even, I can just say that number modulus 2. And if it prints out 0, we know it's even because there's no remainder if we do it by 2. However, if it is not an even number, it's an odd number, it will be 1. So using modulus, real-world application using modulus is to check if something is divisible or to check if it's even or odd. So we've talked about the addition operator, the subtraction operator, the multiplication operator, the division operator, and the modulus operator. And these are our basic math operators. Now, I want to also show you something which I think is very, very useful. Let's say I have a variable and I call it number of cookies. Number of cookies. And I set it to 4. Remember in the last video, I might have used this example where I said, okay, well, if I bake 2 more cookies and I put them in the jar, then the number of cookies should increase by 2. So I changed it to number of cookies equals 6. But how can we do this a different way? Because we know if we bake 2 cookies, we want to add 2 cookies to this. We could say number of cookies equals number of cookies plus 2. And what that does is it takes the current number of cookies, adds 2 to it, and then assigns it back to number of cookies. This is a convenient way of adding 2 to the number of cookies. However, there is another way in Swift which is really useful. This is the same thing as the code above. Number of cookies plus equals 2. Now you're probably wondering, wait, what did I just do? There are certain operators in Swift that you can actually combine in this case. So number of cookies equals number of cookies plus 2. In Swift, we can actually combine that to number of cookies plus equals 2. What that's saying is that number of cookies is equal to number of cookies plus 2. It's the same thing, but much shorter and much easier to see. If I were to print out the results of this, you can see that if I print it, it should be 6 because I'm adding 2 to 4. I can even use the subtraction operator. Subtract equals 2. And you'll notice that number of cookies minus equals 2 will equal 2. The plus equals and minus equals operator is extremely useful and is a shortcut to remember to make your code a little bit easier to read. So that is the last thing that I wanted to add to this lesson before I wrap it up, is that we can use shortcut operators such as plus equals and minus equals. Plus equals and minus equals to make our code more concise. Did I spell that correctly? Concise. There we go. So in this video, we've reviewed the data types, mainly integer and double. We've reviewed the addition, subtraction, and multiplication operator. You learned some of the nuances with the division operator and how if we want it to actually be a double return value, we want to divide it by an actual double. And we've also learned that if we divide it by an integer, so for example, variable, and I'd said sample int is equal to 8 divided by 3, if we're dividing 2 integers, it will still return to us, sample integer, it will still return to us basically the value, which is supposed to be, it's supposed to be 2.6666, and that is the actual value. It just cuts off the decimal part and gives us that individual number. And that is what it's doing, because it's just an integer. It's trying to store this value right here. It's trying to store this as an integer, and how it does it is that it just cuts off the decimal portion. So we talked about that, and then we also talked about the modulus operator. And the last thing is that we talked about the shortcut operators plus equals and minus equals. Thanks for watching, and if you had any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. Like and subscribe for more content. Again, thanks for watching.